$225 a day in the 1800s.
You're at 109 right now.
Alrighty. This is the book, Hurry Freedom. African Americans in Gold Rush, California. Where was I? When we last left off, I read chapter 1. Chapter 1 is entitled, We Saw a Black Man Straining. I will continue with chapter 2, which is entitled, Our Hearts Soared to the Clouds. Several pages here. Excuse me, I need to sneeze. I guess not. All right, chapter 2, Our Hearts Soared to the Clouds. After arriving in California, African Americans tended to form into groups. It was safer to travel with others and easy to make friends with strangers who faced the same odds. Using wages from the overland trip, they purchased picks, pans, maps, blankets, and food. Most walked to the gold fields carrying their possessions. The deeply rutted wagon, I'll read that again. The deeply rutted wagon trails leading to the mining areas were crowded with thousands of men intent on getting rich. I'm a traveler, and I've traveled alone all across the globe. The good thing about traveling alone is that it's an easy task. You grab your bags, you buy your tickets, you board the plane, train, whatever, or car, the automobile, whatever. Traveling with groups, with friends, is a more pleasurable experience because when you're a solo traveler, you are alone and you can get lonely. Sure, you could be lonely in a group as well, but when you're with friends and you're sharing the experience, it can be a far greater experience. So I understand what they're saying, that point, especially if you're traveling, for thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of miles, and you need provisions to bring along with you, water and food and picks, pans, maps, blankets, etc., and food. Yeah, the more people you travel with, the more that you can actually carry, the more you'll also need, but, And then lastly, what I'll say about this is there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Just some things to think about. Where was I? When they reached the gold fields in the Sierra Nevada mountains, the black prospectors were blocked from entering. William Hall and his party arrived in 1850 and were chased off by guards firing shots in the air. A man named Johnson was clubbed to the ground, and a miner known as Negro Dan was found shot in the back with his possessions taken. In most choice areas, white 49ers had formed mining associations to protect claims and share the expense of building equipment. Each excluded African Americans as well as Chinese, Mexicans, and Native Americans. It was treacherous for anyone who was non-white, for them to go to California to seek gold. Treacherous. This paragraph underscores that. If you weren't white and you tried to become rich in California during the gold rush, man, you better thank your lucky stars if you weren't murdered, if you weren't beaten, because the white people White man didn't want anyone competing with him. He wanted all the riches to himself. It's the same thing today. As a black man, you get your college degree, you go into the mostly white dominated corporations and ask for a job, and they'll look at you as if you're crazy, unqualified, get out of here. The truth of the matter is we are qualified, but they just don't want us in those environments competing against them. And they don't want the idea that, oh, we can do the job just as well as you can. They don't want that idea to proliferate. I think I can only guess. No, wait a minute. Not only guess, I saw this principle in action just a few years ago. I walked into a real estate office and everyone in there was white or of a non-melanated hue. No one there was dark. And if you need to survive in Los Angeles, California, and you need a job, and if your employer or if that person that you seek a job from is only looking to hire someone who is of a lighter complexion, who is less melanated than you are, then the chances of you getting that job are slim. So my point is, I saw it just a few years ago when I walked into an office. I was delivering food at the time. Delivering food. It was a real estate office, and they looked at me with suspicious eyes, and they wanted me to get out of there. They wanted me to leave the food and get out as quickly as possible. They didn't know that I had a real estate. I am a real estate salesperson. I've had a license since 2007. They didn't know anything about me. Only the fact that I'm deeply melanated. But anyway, where was I? The gold rush was for whites only. That's what I'm saying. That's the sentence. The gold rush was for whites only. The African Americans had figured as much before making the trip, and they moved on to other locations where whites weren't mining. Working in groups of 20 or more, they looked for gold in isolated locales that came to be known by names like Negro Hill, Negro Bar, and Negro Flat. There were more than 30 such locations in California, although many weren't listed on any map. During daylight hours, they scooped up sand, swirled it in pans, and studied the grains for any sign of gold. At night, they slept in tents or in the open air, and when they ran out of food, they ate berries and rabbits for the evening meal. What a time it was for some of them. William Oliver, an ex-slave from Maryland and cook for a wagon train, found gold and bought his wife and children out of slavery. So did James Martin and Edward Jones, who brought their families to California to start a new life. In the noise and excitement of the gold rush, these events received little notice. No matter, for a newspaper couldn't convey the emotions of a man who could now buy freedom for his family. Abolitionist papers did report the stories while still urging readers not to go to California. One of the most widely read accounts concerned William Hall. Hall found enough gold to return to New York and marry. He spent his money on a wedding that a newspaper said had a splendor without parallel in the history of colored society in New York. Before he returned to California in 1851 to open a billiard parlor, Hall spoke to a crowd numbering in the hundreds. His upbeat speech was called Hopes and Prospects of Colored People in California, and caused others to head west. Of the 2,000 African Americans in California by 1852, about 1,500 tried to find gold. Because of the mining associations, most failed, but about 200 succeeded. The result, let me read that sentence again. Because of the mining associations, the white boys who were forcing blacks to get away from where they were prospecting, most African Americans failed, but about 200 succeeded. 200 blacks succeeded. The result was an end to poverty for 200 African Americans and freedom for about another 500 people bought with California gold. Other African Americans didn't bother searching for gold. They looked for opportunities in San Francisco. By 1850, California's largest city with a population of 10,000. It was the main port of entry for passengers on ocean steamers lucky enough to reach California. All right, I'll say this. We'll probably get some evidence of what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it now. In California's Black Pioneers, another book, it talks about how because of these mining associations that blacks were pushed out of, and because it was so treacherous to prospect for gold, many blacks decided they're not even going to try to mine for gold. Instead, because mining for gold could mean that you lose your life, right? That is mining for gold in the wrong areas where the white people didn't want you. Okay. So what did we do? Well, we found that these white prospectors, these white men still needed things. They needed food. They needed their clothes to be washed. They needed haircuts. And so we became barbers, cooks, laundrymen, and several other professions because we were pushed out, basically, of the industry. So another industry was created. The service industry was created due to the wealth of the gold rush. And there we were. On September 9th, 1850, Mifflin Gibbs disembarked from the Golden Gate, whose deck was littered with trash. He carried a banged-up suitcase and had the look of a man who needed a new life. Not knowing anyone in San Francisco, he walked the busy streets, apparently without a specific plan or vision of his future. Although stories of striking it rich had drawn him to California, he never said if he intended to mine for gold. Gibbs was articulate and intelligent, and may have viewed California as just a place where he might succeed if given an opportunity. He quickly discovered that San Francisco might not be the place to turn his life around. Most stores and businesses displayed signs reading "No Negroes" and "No Coloreds Allowed," and whites avoided him as he made his way around the city. He wasn't surprised. With only a few pennies in his pocket, at least he didn't have to worry about being robbed. He kept wandering until he saw several black men talking in front of a hotel on Kearny Street. It wasn't the best-looking place, but it was black-owned, and Gibbs entered. The sign above the clerk read, "Board, $12 a week in advance." Gibbs said, "Had I looked through a magnifying glass, the letters could not have appeared larger. They seemed to ask, 'Who are you and do you have any money?'" Gibbs responded by spending his last 10 cents on a cigar at the hotel. It wasn't the first time that he had been totally broke, but it was the first time to be broke 3,000 miles from home. He left the hotel, and after several attempts to find employment of any kind, he approached a house under construction and asked the contractor for work. The man didn't need any help, but Gibbs kept asking for just a few days' work or a few hours. The wages were $10 a day, and the contractor finally agreed to give Gibbs 2 days' work if he would accept $9 a day. He agreed, but there was a catch. He had to have his own tools. Now, walking with a purpose, he came upon a large tent with an assortment of hardware and the tools he needed. After telling the merchant that he had no money but had a job, the man looked him over and proclaimed, "All right, take them." "I felt great relief," Gibbs said, "when I paid the merchant and my landlord on the following Saturday." It was a start, but Gibbs's job only lasted 2 days. The white carpenters refused to work with an African American and threatened to strike if Gibbs wasn't fired. He was a good carpenter, at least as good as the others. The contractor didn't want to let Gibbs go and made him an offer. If he could find 6 carpenters with his skills who would work with him, the contractor would fire his workforce and hire Gibbs's crew. "I could not find the men he wanted," Gibbs said, "or other employment of that kind." He had tools and a few dollars in his pocket, but San Francisco wasn't any different from Philadelphia. He would have to try something else. Man, them white boys could be something. They're working together. That's group economics. They're working together, and they said, man, we're going to stop working. We're going to stop doing this work if you hire these people. Wow. That's tremendous. That's powerful. Most black prospectors were in the same situation, and some were quick to find a way out. Having failed at mining for themselves, a few hundred went to work for white miners. Many whites believed that blacks had a special gift for finding gold, and they had money to hire people to look for them. African Americans had no special gift, but they took advantage of the belief. They acted as if possessed by magic and said they had dreams that told of riches for their employers. They earned around $8 a day, and by working in choice areas, they found gold and kept the belief alive. Can you imagine getting a job? That's called fake it till you make it. Can you imagine faking it and never finding gold? And your white employer being greedy and unscrupulous and despicable and diabolic, so much so that they said, look, I paid you to find gold for me, you didn't do it, give me my money back or I'm taking your life. I could see that happening. That's a terrible situation. I'm not saying it did happen. I'm not saying it didn't happen. Can you imagine being in that position? You had to fool them with some magic. Hey, man. When employers mentioned these hired hands, they did so with indifference, almost as an afterthought. An ex-slave named Isidore, an elderly man, pounded rocks with a hand hammer for 12 hours a day and mined an average of $75 worth of gold a day for Franklin Morse. Morse remarked in passing that Isidore was saving most of the $8 in wages to buy his wife's freedom. Another wrote casually, I hired a Negro man to dig for me. He hopes to redeem his wife and 7 children from slavery. The accounts totally missed the drama of the work that resulted in freedom. Slaves in California hit the same wall as the black prospectors from the north. Some were allowed by their owners to go on their own to the gold fields, but the mining associations drove them off, and they ended up at the locations where free blacks searched for gold. They had about as much luck, but some succeeded and bought their freedom. Alvin Cuffey was an example, a slave from Missouri. Cuffey was brought to California in 1849. After mining for 8 months, he earned $5,000, and by washing clothes for miners at night, there it is, a laundryman, that's what he was, he earned another $700. Cuffey's owner took the money took the money. Cuffy's owner took his money, broke his promise of freedom, and brought Cuffy back to Missouri, where he was sold at auction. Man, that's cold-blooded, bro. He asked for a second chance, which his new owner granted, setting the price for Cuffy's freedom at $1,500. He had the money after 4 months of mining, and he was set free. Slaves also earned their freedom by cooking for whites or finding other jobs. George Washington Dennis was a remarkable example. He was owned by Green Dennis, who was also his father. After they arrived in San Francisco in 1849, Green Dennis formed a partnership with others to operate the El Dorado Hotel. It didn't have any rooms and was actually a tent housing 10 gambling tables that ran day and night. George Dennis was paid 50 cents a day to sweep the floor, which was made of rough lumber. After working for 3 months and collecting 5 and 10 cent pieces that had fallen on the floor, Dennis had $1,000, which his father accepted, granting his freedom. He kept sweeping and eyeballing the floor until he earned around another $950, which he used to buy freedom for his mother, who was also owned by his father. Owned by his father. He was owned by his father. His mother was owned by his father. Man, this is wild. Afterward, Dennis rented one of the gambling tables and hired his mother to serve hot meals at stiff prices. $5 for a bowl of stew, $2 for a chunk of cornbread. They netted an average profit of $225 a day. Wait a minute. Back in the 1800s, they netted an average profit of $225 a day, some of which was used to buy relatives out of slavery? Wait. Dennis rented one of the gambling tables and hired his mother to serve hot meals at stiff prices. $5 for a bowl of stew, $2 for a chunk of cornbread. They netted an average of $225 a day, some of which was used to buy relatives out of slavery. Wait, if they made $225 a day in the 1800s, oh man, this is big news. $225 a day in the 1800s, more than 200 years ago. That's what they were making back then. I just read something that just changed my life. Oh my gosh. There's no way possible in the year 2024 that there's no way possible. There's no reason why in the year 2024 I should be making less than some people made 200 years ago in a single day. Man, oh my gosh. Wow. At least 300 people worked their way out of slavery in California by finding gold or working at other jobs. They earned $750,000 for their owners and used surplus wages to buy freedom for family members in the South. Meanwhile, slaves continued to arrive in California. The total stayed at about 600 throughout the gold rush period. This included slaves who came with their owners and slaves who came by themselves to earn money for their owners and perhaps buy freedom. After losing his carpenter job, Mifflin Gibbs became a boot black. Normally, a boot black polishes shoes, but in San Francisco, a rainy city with hundreds of horses, a boot black first scraped mud and animal droppings from boots and then applied polish. Gibbs probably chose the job because of the pay. He worked in front of the hotels and gambling houses and earned an average of $12 a day, more than he could have made as a carpenter had he been able to work at that trade. After 9 months of removing muck, he had earned nearly $2,000, 10 times what he could have earned in Philadelphia. Gibbs now had hats that were in fashion, several pairs of shoes, and 3 new suits, which he wore after work. He looked good when he shopped for groceries and personal items in the stores where he was welcome. Because he was friendly and because clean shoes were much desired, Gibbs came to know hundreds of whites and most African Americans in the city, including William Hall and George Washington Dennis. San Francisco's population grew larger every week, but it was a small city for the 500 African Americans who lived there. Their neighborhood spanned about 3 blocks and included the hotel where Gibbs had bought a cigar when he first arrived and where he now boarded as a resident. Although his work was in the white section of town, his neighborhood was home, a place where friends could meet and talk without looking over their shoulders. Besides new clothes, Gibbs bought a subscription to the North Star and was known among his friends as an acquaintance of Frederick Douglass, a distinction of some merit. The experiences of African Americans in the early years of the gold rush ranged from sudden riches to more poverty, the latter being typical. Most found no gold. A few hundred went to work for whites, while others, like Gibbs, seized opportunities in San Francisco. Among these different experiences, Moses Tucker's stands out as an example of what the gold rush could mean for those who took the dare. A former slave from Virginia, Tucker learned to read and write in the African Methodist Church in Philadelphia. He kept a journal of his life at a place called Negro Bend, where he and others dug for gold in 1850. Another miner named Brown found a vein so rich that he shared the fortune. 9 men each bought someone out of slavery with Brown's gold, including Moses Tucker. He rescued his wife and baby daughter and wrote about the celebration at Negro Bend. Last night we gave thanks to God and the miner Brown for our deliverance. We prayed and we cried, and every man in camp cried. Practically speaking, the woman called Lorena rolled in the grass, weeping and laughing at the same time. We sang to the angels and our hearts soared to the clouds. Oh, California! Oh, California! That was chapter 2, y'all.
You're at 109 right now.